Hi, welcome to the Scott Patrick Show. I'm David Lyons and my co-panelist Bill Huff from Huff Family Services and Huff Capital Partners. Welcome, Bill, again to the show.
Thank you.
And today we want to be able to talk a little bit about what equity is in a property and how equity can be used in different forms or fashions. And a lot of people have equity in their properties. When you put a down payment on a property, that's equity
Right.
that continues to grow. Equity can grow in a couple different ways. It can grow through the property value increasing, can add more equity to your position. Or as you pay down your mortgage, every time you make a principal payment, that gives you more equity in that particular property. The question though is not how you can make equity in a property, but how you can utilize that equity in your business, in your real estate business.
Right.
And that's kind of what we want to be able to talk about today. There's a number of different ways, and Bill, what kind of ways do you see that equity can be used in real estate business?
Well, a couple different ways. While you were talking, I wrote down the words debt equity.
Hmm.
And that term is, typically associated with equity that is trapped in, for the most part, single family homes for, the average person.
Hmm.
And in terms of being able to, is typically referred to being dead as in it is unusable. It is oh, equity that is there but is not being exercised to grow.
You
Um,
can't utilize it.
right, right. And it's been a while since I heard some stats on that, but that number across the country is, obviously well in the trillions of money that's considered trapped, you know. Um, but in terms of so that is one way where equity is is not being exercised, cannot grow at a faster rate than it's currently growing. Um, in terms of on the investor side, the Avenue B side, I would say that you know one way is to utilize equity in an investment property, pulling it out so that you can continue to make new acquisitions. And
Hmm.
that is, for on the investor side, that is the typical case of using equity to keep, as you continue to grow. That's really the a method to access cash and to grow the portfolio.
I mean, when you look at what's the banking system is or the financial system is, it's debt based.
Yes.
So by creating debt, you're actually creating wealth in a sense because you're utilizing the wealth that you have in properties that you possess. And the more properties you have, the more equity you have, the bigger position that you would be able to utilize equity in. Some of the issues that have come about with being able to pull equity is that there aren't many. You can do a HELOC, which is a homeowner's loan on your equity loan. Well, if you have a LLC, you can't do a HELOC.
Correct.
You have to personally own the property to do a HELOC. For a business, they do have business HELOCs, but they're very rare, and banks don't like to be able to utilize them, which always brings a question in my head as to how do these big real estate investors actually do pull the equity out of apartment buildings and different things along, in that kind of a scale.
Yeah.
And my first thought on that is, well, the banks make a lot of money on being able to do that.
Right.
So there must be a threshold there
That
for banks to be able to allow businesses to refinance and do an equity pull, because
Y-
that's basically what it is. They're refinancing the loan
Correct.
to be able to utilize the equity and in the property.
The, the I guess, and I think about that same thing, and I think it comes down to scale and size. The big, the more money that a bank has loaned out, and being that, and the more money they can make off of that, there's going to be a little bit more priority and flexibility to those, and especially when you talk about apartment buildings, 50 to $100 million apartment buildings. And those loan terms are much shorter on those types of assets where they're more, 3 to 5 years, more interest only. And so these banks know, they know this the short period of time, meaning that the apartment complex manager, they're going to have to refi. And so that whole structure, based on the size of the asset and then the need to refi those loans, banks are going to be more open to, you know, refinancing and things of that nature versus your typical mom and pop investor who owns, just a few rentals here and there. It's a totally different scenario.
Right. I mean, when you talk about your business plan and your why and why you want to be able to get into real estate and your plan on how to be able to execute that, a lot of people don't really understand the power behind what equity is. And when we're talking about Avenue B and being able to find investors to be able to refi a property that is paid in full. Let's say you have a property that's paid in full, and you wanted to be able to do the Avenue B thing. Well, there's one of two ways you can do that. You could sell the property
Right.
and get equity out that way. If that's your business plan and you're wanting to hold the property for 5 years and you're coming up on year four and you list the property and you sell it, that you're pulling the equity out and utilizing the 1031 exchange to put that money back into other properties or to another property. Or you find investors to be able to refi that property and pull the equity out that way without utilizing the banks. Because with the banks, you're going to have to do the personal guarantees. You're going to have to do all the hoops that they want to be able to run through to be able to pull that equity. And some of them on a HELOC, they might only give you 50% of what the equity is.
Right.
Or maybe 70 or
Yeah.
70 at the max. But usually on a property that has a lot of equity, they're only going to give you maybe 50 or 60% of what that equity is. They're not going to give you 100%.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because if something goes south, they want to be able to have a good position in that property, be able to get their money back plus, right?
Right. It's a hedge that favors the banking institution. Yeah.
And you always have to think about it that way too, because when you have when you're talking to an investor too, investors are thinking the same way. They might be a little bit more lenient because you're in the same avenue as they are, right?
Mhm.
But they want to be able to hedge things the best way for them too. It's like a contract. When you write a contract and you're the one writing the contract, that contract's going to benefit you more than it's going to benefit the other person that's signing that contract, right?
Right. Right.
So banks aren't any different with that. They're putting everything into their ballpark and getting as much as they possibly can to secure and lessen their risk.
Right.
And I was speaking with one of my other clients this week and um, doing some restructuring on them because we were raising, a good amount for them, a little over $5 million for them to be able to do a project. And from the one, when that property closes, that property is going to have, I think it was 371 $100,000 in equity from day one.
Wow, nice, nice.
Not counting cash flow or
Right.
anything, just straight up equity from day one because one of the appraisal came back higher than what was expected,
Oh, nice, nice.
which was nice, but also just how things are structured. Just from day one, the equity in the property and with this particular thing, the investors are getting 15% of the equity. So right from day one, they're getting equity up front as soon as that contract is signed and the property is
That's nice.
closed. Those are
Yeah,
always nice deals
yeah,
for investors and for the client
yeah.
because it's a good project. And investors aren't necessarily sold on you, but they're sold on the project.
Right.
If the
But
project is a good project and it's going to
right,
make a good amount of money on both front and back end for them,
right.
that's a good project for investors and they want to be able to look at projects like that.
Yeah, and that then that allows you as the operator to build up a solid client base because based on the performance. And that's as an operator, that's a good feeling knowing that you've structured things so that you've maximized the ability, the returns for the investor. And then you've done all you can, and then it's a bonus when you get a great appraisal or fast appreciation. Those are market forces that add on to it. So it's like it's a great setup.
We usually don't get appraisals like that very often, right? It's usually the other way. Like it's
Right.
not quite as
Yeah.
much as what you really wanted it to be,
Yeah.
and you're dealing with. So when you get an appraisal that's higher than what it's supposed to be, those are sort of like winning the lottery in a sense,
That's
because they
yes.
don't they don't come around that far
They
very much.
don't. They don't. That's that. Yeah. No, that's a great setup. To go into a a an investment with equity at the beginning. That's a nice feeling. Yeah.
And and like I said, when you put money down on a property, or if you're paying that property with cash, you have 100% equity at that point because you've paid with cash. So which is better? Is it better to finance that property and put as little in as you have and have less equity and more debt? Or is it better to pay off a property and, at the very beginning, pay cash and have a whole bunch of equity that it's hard to be able to utilize it unless you have to sell it,
Right.
which
Yeah.
takes some time depending on the property and everything.
Uh, that is the $1 million question, and looking at it from a couple different perspectives. One is the mom and pop investor. They don't have the cash, obviously, to buy the property outright. So they're going to be typically, in most cases, they're going to be forced into a situation where they have to go the loan route, put a down payment, and try to build that way. That is, I would say,
96% of everybody, pretty
yes,
much.
yes, and that is a hard road. Speaking from experience, that is a hard road to go down. Um,
Well, 'cause it limits you, right? It
yes, and
limits in what you can do because when you're going down Avenue A with the banks, there's that phrase that's called debt to income ratio,
yes.
right? That pretty much kills everything at a certain point. They won't lend to you anymore because your debt to income ratio is overextended.
Correct. And two more things. One is going down the traditional lending path, you're eventually capped at the number of loans that you can have under
I
your.
think it's three, isn't it?
No, it's that, I don't remember. The numbers,
Outside of your personal residence, I think it's like three, right?
it's somewhere in
Might
there.
be four,
Yes.
but it's somewhere in that three to four range, I think.
So you run into that issue. And then the other issue is having a small portfolio from a lender perspective looks bad on paper. And this is where
This is where Avenue B comes in because
on it,
Avenue B doesn't really worry about
Right.
that because we understand it.
Correct. And I was just on the tax side, you look great, but on the lender, traditional lending perspective, you look
You're
terrible.
horrible.
Right. And it's like night and day. It's the way the system is set up. And so that speaks to the need to really investigate Avenue B in terms of lending options is I think what we're saying here.
Yeah, because there are more options out there.
Yeah.
It might take just a little bit longer to get started with it, which we've said from the very beginning that it takes more time to be able to get set up on Avenue B and to find that pool of investors that are investing in you
Yes.
to build projects and to do projects. And we need to be able to utilize that through the course of time, when it comes to wanting to do a bigger project
Yes.
outside of what you've been doing or do multiple projects, you need more cash.
Yes.
And equity is the answer to more cash. So you can approach your investors and say, I'd like to refi these properties so I can get the equity to be able to use over here with X, Y, and Z. And it's X, Y, and Z that is going to be able to pay you back
Right.
uh, with the refi, because that's the same thing the banks are going to do. The banks are going to look at the revenue projections and the revenue that's generated off of those properties that you are going to buy to make sure that you can make the payments.
Right. Right.
You can't buy a property that isn't going to produce revenue that's going to make payments.
Right.
Even if it's a good project, if it doesn't produce the revenue, an investor isn't going to be wanting to get into that with you because it doesn't produce the revenue needed to be able to pay them back.
Right.
And
Right.
they want to make sure that they get paid back, right?
And you can also look at it from Avenue A. Traditionally, the bank is looking at the guarantor. Avenue B, what's being looked at is the performance of the property, the actual asset. And that's a huge difference. You want to let the asset be the performance of the asset to determine any investment, lending options, not you.
I've always growing up on a farm, with my mom and dad, they had quite a bit of farm ground, and they have farm ground that's been paid off for decades, right? Well, yeah, it's always kind of drove me crazy, to be honest, because you have millions of dollars worth of equity that you could utilize somewhere else instead of just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah,
Sure, it appreciates and everything, but it appreciates for who?
that's a good point. Yeah,
Who is that appreciation going to benefit? It's definitely going to benefit the state because they're going to get a bigger portion, with taxes or with capital gains or
or,
however that flows. Uh, um, you've got to be able to utilize the equity that's in the properties that you have
right.
instead of just sitting there and being asset rich and cash poor.
Well, it's a mindset is I think what we're talking about, especially on Avenue A, because that going down that path, typically you're talking about comfort, security, financial security, and under that type of mindset, paying off a single family home, those types of things are the goal
Hmm.
because the perceived benefit is security. So they're trading being able to scale that debt equity for security. And that is the typical mindset on Avenue A. Avenue
Hmm.
B, we're looking at what you just described, the ability to take equity that is sitting there, trapped, dead, whatever you call it, and continue to,
Dead, pretty
yeah,
much dead.
yeah,
That's my definition. Is
yeah,
equity is dead
yes,
unless you're utilizing it. The other thing about equity is it is when you pull it out, it's not taxable,
Right.
right?
Yes.
It's not taxable. So you don't have to worry about paying taxes on it because you're pulling the equity out of it.
Right.
Some people might ask the question, well, isn't equity like a 401k? Because it's a gain on what it was before you
Right.
bought it. I said, well, yeah, in a sense. When you buy a property at say $400,000 and you have say $100,000 in equity in it, but the property appreciates to $450,000. Well, if you were selling the property to pull the equity out, you would have capital gains on that $50,000 of gain on that property's value. Uh, but you wouldn't have to pay taxes on the 400,000
Right.
because that was your baseline.
Right.
That was your buy-in on that. That's the difference between where capital gains is. And if you did $100,000 in improvements, you actually have $500,000 in your baseline because you added to the value of the property by upgrading it.
Right. Right.
So if you sold it for $450,000, you've actually got a $50,000 loss with the improvements that you had on the property. But we're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit on the tax thing. But it's still it's equity,
Yes.
and you don't have to pay taxes on it. You don't have to because it's not income,
Right. Right. Yeah.
which is an advantage.
Yes. Yeah. On the Avenue B side, uh, you mentioned, the exit strategy of selling capital gains or 1031 into another project. Um, Another, option to exercise that equity is to do the refinance and cash out,
Hmm.
and return the investor's initial investment back to them, but still own the asset.
Hmm.
And that is obviously the utopia uh, uh, scenario to where all of the original capital is being returned to investors, but you still control the asset that may, should still produce cash flow. So
Right.
that is a nice scenario in itself.
That's actually what they call it. I think is a
Yes,
cash out refi.
yes,
Because we're cashing out the equity in the property
yes,
and refinancing it, which is always a good thing. I've always found it a little bit difficult to be able to do that sometimes. They say that it's very easy to do it, but I haven't found the easy part of it yet. It's kind of difficult sometimes. But then again, I haven't reached that plateau yet
that's
where banks are fumbling over themselves to be able to get to you to
right,
refi that property of 1,000 doors
right.
or different things along those lines.
That's
That
yes,
I haven't reached that point yet.
yeah. I haven't either, but we would be when we do reach that, we'll be shocked because the system that's what the system is built for, not for the everyday person that gets hammered, so to speak. But yes, you're right. They're actually, falling over themselves trying to refi um, and provide ideal loan terms for these larger assets such as apartment buildings, um, buildings of that nature.
Yeah, and I always think it's not just in real estate uh, that plays into. It's kind of across the board. Car dealerships. They have to buy those cars from the manufacturer, and they have to pay interest on those cars while they're sitting on the lot. But there's a bank that's financing them.
Right,
Somebody's financing them to be able to purchase the inventory that they have to
right,
be able to sell, to be able to make a profit to be able to pay off the whoever's holding the note on those vehicles.
Right.
and larger developments. We had a conversation this week with concerning Project M and with the builder and the developer, and as we're starting to move into that realm of doing whole subdivisions of townhomes, which could be anywhere from 50 to 100 uh, uh, properties. It's starting to get into that, well, the developer has already reached that avenue because the developer has the credit line
Yes.
or working capital that's provided to them, sort of like a farmer. A
Right.
farmer has a operational capital that is given to them from the bank to be able to do their crops, to
Right.
buy the seed, the chemicals, and everything. Developers, the same way, they have a line of credit with the bank to be able to operate, to
Right.
be able to pay for the materials, to be able to pay for the labor, to be able to pay for the fuel, maintenance on the equipment, or to buy equipment, because they have reached that level with the banks to be able to do that.
Right.
And I don't know, Bill, maybe as we get into the one or two of these projects and we have it, maybe that gets us to that level where the banks are going, yeah, we can give you a $2 million line of credit
That's
to
yes.
be able to do things, or a $5 million line of credit and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
You're right.
Lines of credit are really good. I like lines of credit.
Yes.
And when we start out, let's kind of talk about that just a little bit, because that's sort of
Sure.
like equity in a sense. A line of credit for us getting started usually is a credit card,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's yes. Yes, it
And,
is.
and if you have a limit on your credit card of 10 or 15,000 or maybe $20,000, that's your line of credit.
Right.
When you first start out. As you start moving down the road, you might approach a bank and say, I'd like to open up a line of credit, because, I have my credit card and paying my credit card off and that, but it's not enough.
Right.
I need to be able to have 50 or $100,000 in line of credit. And they might give you a line of credit of 50 or $100,000, which frees you up to be able to do those offers for purchase, escrow funds, and everything through the lines of credit, instead of using your actual cash flow that's coming in. Because if you have to use your cash flow that's coming in to be able to do these uh, offers with escrow funds and different things and inspections and that, then you start running into a problem with your cash flow,
Right.
and that starts to hurt. So a
Yes.
line
Yes.
of credit is an avenue for you to utilize to pay those expenses off as you're growing.
Right. Right.
And it actually becomes necessary at a point. I need to have a line of credit. And you go to the bank and you start asking for a line of credit, and they might give you 25,000, or they might give you 30,000. Then you go to
Yeah.
another bank and you get another 20 or 30,000. You might have 60 or $90,000. You have to figure out, how much of a line of credit do I have
Right.
to be able to make things work as I'm growing, to pay the bills but not affect my cash flow.
Right. That is the ultimate, and I'm going to speak to from the mom and pop investor perspective. That is the challenge that most of us face. We focus initially using our own cash to start growing.
No,
Um,
we're forced to.
right, right, right. And so, but the issue is, um, with smaller deals, we don't factor in other expenses such as the capex budget and the reserve budget are super small because these deals are smaller. And so when you start to grow, you kind of back your way into the business side, which is getting into like building business credit, not personal credit, business credit. And that's something that you learn, down the line, um, and it can be painful. But
Okay. Because business credit doesn't really kick in until year 3 or 5.
right,
Right,
yeah,
right. Most banks aren't even going to look at your business credit, even though you have a DUNS number
right,
and you have a DUNS score
right.
and you have a business credit score, which is really good. Banks don't look at that. They look at
No,
you
they look
personally.
at you, right.
And,
Yes,
and they really don't start looking at the business as an individual business aside from who operates the business till in my own thinking, I think it's well past 5 years. I think you have to have a number of profitable years underneath your belt. But for Avenue B, we don't like to show profit. We like to show loss
right.
because of the way that our structure is set up.
Well, it's a number of years and the size of the assets in the entity. And
Mhm.
you can have, we keep kind of bumping up against this, and it is what is that range of asset value, which has a certain level of equity in it that changes the whole banking industry conversation. What is
Let
that
me let,
threshold?
let me ask you a question. When we're talking about asset value, we're talking about balance sheets,
Right.
and the assets that are held by the business. So let's say, for instance, we have um, $10 million in assets,
Mhm.
and we have, say, $4 million in equity
Okay.
out of that 10 million. And uh, which is better, to have $4 million in equity in the asset or to have $4 million in cash
Ooh.
and
Hmm.
the $10 million equity? Which is a stronger position? Having the cash on hand
Yeah.
or having the equity cash in the asset?
So boy, that's a multi, my first, I can look at that from a couple different angles. The first one is the tax side, right? And that tells me that for a lot of investors, they're trying to find a balance of showing a loss, but having cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have, and that balance, that gets back to the how much of a loan and how much debt do you have on the property and how much equity you have. And so it's a balancing game. If your goal is to do that, then you're
Well,
looking at a balancing game between equity and debt.
I think that's what investors are looking for, as far as, if my business plan is to be able to own assets, right? And to be able to have the equity in the assets, but also have a strong cash position
Right.
in your business. What that does is it shows the investor that my plan is working.
I see.
How's and somebody might be asking, how's that? Well, if I'm showing a loss of 300 or $400,000 through accelerated depreciation and depreciation on the properties and the losses on the properties and different things in that avenue, and I'm showing a loss on my taxes, on my business taxes of, say, $400,000. But yet in my bank statement, because you have to be able to show it, right?
Right.
In my bank statement, I have $600,000 in cash.
Right.
I've not only got $10 million in assets and $4 million worth of equity in those properties, plus I have 600,000, $600,000 in cash in the
Right.
bank.
Right.
It doesn't matter that there's that I'm showing a negative.
Right,
I've got the assets behind me to say to Mr. Banker, I need a $4 million or $3 million line of credit,
right, right. Yeah,
and the bank's gonna be able to see, well, even though you show a $400,000 loss on your business taxes, you've got $600,000 in cash
yes,
in my bank.
right,
Plus, you have $4 million worth of equity in the $10 million worth of assets that you have.
correct, correct.
It could justify a $4 million line of credit.
Oh, it could. You're exactly right. I would say that I keep going back to the mom and pop investors. They're while they're able to build up equity. The challenge they're faced because they're trying to acquire, they have very limited or zero cash, and so they that scenario is not attractive, to the traditional banking system.
No, you have to keep using credit cards,
Yeah, yeah,
which is kind of a negative, really, because you're dealing with the game of your credit score, because
right.
it is a game.
It
It,
is a
it
game.
it's a it it's rigged against you,
Right, right,
because every time somebody checks your credit, it's an inquiry and your credit score goes down,
right,
which means you have to pay more interest
right.
because you have a lower score, which means on everything, insurance,
Yes,
all these different things. Anytime somebody does an inquiry and checks your credit as a hard pull,
right.
that affects your credit score for, I think it's 3 or 5 years, I think, before that thing falls off. I think it's
Yeah,
3 years, maybe it's 2 or 3 years. But those inquiries stay on your credit report for a long time, so
right,
they affect your credit score.
right.
If you have, say, 5 or 6 credit cards that have a $10,000 limit on them, that affects your credit score because you have too many credit cards. You have too much value. And then if you cap those out, that affects your credit score too.
Right.
The mom and pop is, and I've been there, you've been there, and that you utilize the cash that you have available,
Right,
because that's what you have to be able to do, because you haven't reached the level yet to where you can go and get the proper tool, which
right,
is the actual bank line of credit for your business.
right, right.
You have to be able to use these steps, and it's really kind of cruel when you
It
think
is.
about it. The
It
banks are
is.
vicious.
Well, the
The
system.
banks are vicious because they issue these credit. Oh, we'll give you a business credit card. It happened to me when I opened up my business checking account. Same day, in the next sentence, oh, we'll give you a business credit card. And they give me a business credit card for a $15,000 line of credit,
Right.
that you can utilize. Well, it's a vicious circle. It
It
really
is.
is, because they're doing that because it's not because of the generosity of their heart. That's their business plan,
Right, right.
because they're making more money on that credit card than you can imagine them
Oh, I mean,
making,
yeah,
because if you don't pay that thing off every month, they're making additional interest.
right.
They're making, everything. And if you mispay, there goes the credit score and everything
It- the-
along the line, because banks don't like you when you pay those credit cards off every month.
well, they know, but they know that crowd is a small percentage.
It's a small percentage of because everybody's going to utilize them, and they're not going to pay those
Right.
off every
They're
month.
right. They can, that's a small percentage. The mass is going to not pay it off.
Mhm.
And that is, you're absolutely right. That is written into their business plan. And
It
it
really
is.
is.
It
It
is. I
is,
mean, actually, I would say their business plan was developed around the consumer. Um, and
because it's
or
debt.
yeah,
It's consumer debt.
yeah, yeah. That is what drives. I mean, you know, yeah, that is what drives the banking industry. They put new money. That's how new money gets injected into the economy. They take that money,
Well, that's how new money is created in the
create it. Yeah,
economy,
yes,
because banks create money.
Right. Right.
The
Right.
Federal Reserve can print money as much as they want, right?
Right.
The Treasury is just a printing machine,
Right.
and banks create money
Right. Right.
by giving loans and by giving credit cards and by
Yes.
doing all these things. They're creating money.
Yes. The banking system is the Fed's way to, as they print money, the banking system is what puts that into this, injects it into the system via loans and things like of that nature. Um, I want to go back to the auto, say you have a new car, uh a car, new car, business where they're selling cars. So in that scenario, vehicles are a depreciating asset sitting on the lot.
Hmm.
It's different from a piece of real estate. So then the question then becomes, if the asset just sitting there, because we drive by all these car dealerships, like, they're full of cars, and I'm like, they're sitting there depreciating. So how does a lender then, it has to be the cash position of those dealerships that helps, because the asset is depreciating. And so if there is equity, it's it's decreasing. So that I'm
Well, I've always heard the phrase, it doesn't decrease until somebody drives it off the lot.
very true, very true.
And as long as I think the depreciation on the assets, and I don't know, but this is just my thought that the depreciation on the lot when the dealer still owns that asset is in the miles that are driven on that vehicle.
Okay. Okay.
Because some dealerships have their salespeople drive the cars as demos,
Right. Right.
and they can't, when there's so many miles on that vehicle, they can't sell it as a new vehicle. They sell it as a new used,
Right. Right.
because it has 200 or 300 miles on it.
Awesome. Yeah.
And that, so I think that's where the depreciation part of the plays into the fact with the, and like I said, I don't know, but I'm thinking it's the miles that are driven on the vehicle. So if you have a vehicle that only has 2 miles on it from the manufacturer to driving it off the semi that delivers it
That,
to the
yeah.
dealership, that asset hasn't depreciated yet because it only has 2 miles on it. It's still
Okay.
considered new,
Yeah.
so
Interesting.
that's just my thinking on it. I might be
Well,
completely wrong, but I think that might be it.
well, that's so the equity that we're discussing today in that scenario, there, does it even exist in that type of business? Does equity does equity exist in a car dealership business?
Well, yeah, because they own the building,
They own the real estate, right? Not in the yeah, so not in the real not in the
not
vehicle.
in the vehicles. It's in the real estate that for their building.
Right, right,
Their
right.
their building is their equity.
Yeah, yeah. And the cars are a mass depreciation
They get to
opportunity.
depreciate that
Yeah,
off. Yeah,
yeah,
probably.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
The rules are basically about the same for any kind of business, but it's the best in real estate.
Right, right,
I mean, other businesses, you have real estate and you can do certain things, but the real estate investor that invests in real estate, that has the best of all worlds in it.
right,
You really can't get any better. You have a duplex or a series of duplexes, and the way that the tax codes are now, you can live in one side as your primary residence and have a business in that side of the duplex and rent out the other side, and the tax advantages that you have with the equity in that building and everything else is tremendous.
Oh, it's huge.
You can't get any better.
It can. And
That's why we say if you're gonna buy your first home, buy a duplex.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And just think, going from one unit, which is a single family home, to two units, the whole tax structure is different in that one scenario. It
Mhm.
completely flip-flops because the advantage is to the duplex, not to the single family home. And just by buying one more unit, buying a duplex will put you in a much more advantaged tax situation.
Mhm.
You know,
Which is kind of playing into what we were talking about today in utilizing the equity that you have in your business and equity that you have in your properties, which is in your business, right? So we want to be able to utilize that the best that we possibly can so that we can use it.
yes,
It can't benefit you if you don't use it. Other than the one, other than the one scenario that I just mentioned just a little bit ago with having the equity and the cash to be able to get a line of credit. That's
right,
about the only that's about the only advantage in holding equity in a property is to be able to get a line of credit to be able to compensate for keeping that equity in the property.
right,
Because
right.
that's what it would be.
Yes, yeah,
Otherwise, I'm pulling that equity out to utilize it.
right, right,
And the line of credit is the ability to not have to pull that equity out because I have a line of credit to
right,
be able to utilize.
right. The reality is, especially on the Avenue B side, pulling and utilizing debt equity will grow it faster than if it's just the trapped equity sitting there appreciating at a slower rate. It still will grow, but you're talking. Let's just an example would be equity trapped in a piece of real estate development. Say it's growing at 3 to 5%. If you take that equity out, reinvest it, it scales and more than likely will grow at a much faster rate than the 3 to 5%. And that's just that at the core of this, that's what we're talking about. That's the
Mhm.
difference.
Right. So in this project that I'm working on, Project M, my business plan for that project is to be able to uh, uh, have all the properties, get them built, and then start to sell them. Through the course of a period of time. It could be 5 years or it could be 10 years. I don't know. But that's what the plan is. Because when these properties are all built, I have 100% equity in those properties. Well, the investors and me have 100% equity in those properties. And we want to be able to start pulling that equity out for two things. One, to pay the investors off, to pay them back, and two, to be able to start to utilize those funds for the next project
The next project.
or the
Absolutely.
next two projects.
Right. Right.
So we want to be able to do that. So the interesting question is going to be uh, after this first project is done, uh, am I at that scale now where I can go to a bank in Avenue A and say I need a line of credit
That's what is the threshold of that? Right.
and start oh gosh, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but start to utilize both Avenue A and Avenue B
Yes.
together uh,
Yes. Th-
concurrently, to
So
be
no, this is a good discussion, Dave, because as much as we have pains with Avenue A, the ideal and optimal approach would be to, like you just said, utilize, go to utilizing Avenue A and Avenue B investing, find that happy medium to leverage the traditional banking system to,
to
to
your benefit.
yes, and to scale and grow. And
Right.
but it comes back to what is that threshold? That's really I think what we're on this journey, what we're going to discover. What is that threshold?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna find it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna find it together. You
Yeah.
know, you,
Yeah.
me, and everybody that's listening. We're gonna
Yeah.
find it together. We're gonna know what that threshold is because then we're gonna be able to pass it on to you,
Right.
and say, look, you need to be able to be at a certain threshold to be able to start utilizing and blending both A and B together,
Right. Right.
and using A for your advantage
Right. Right.
in building your real estate empire and building
Yeah.
your business plan and expanding it out.
Is that number, is it 5 million
I
when
don't know.
when the game changes? The banking system knows that, the mass population will never be there. And so, is it 3 million? What is, yeah, we'll definitely discover
Yeah,
that.
it's a smaller percentage of businesses that actually get to that level to do that.
Right. Right.
Because most individuals, we mom and pops operations or businesses, they aren't thinking in that realm.
No. No.
They're thinking, they're doing two or three rehabs a year. Things are good and moving. Wife's happy, paying bills. Kids are in school, have good things, and that they're comfortable with that. Great. That's
Right.
great.
Right.
Um, uh, because there are uh, fewer people like you, Bill, and like me that want to get to those higher levels because our plans are bigger.
Yes. Right.
Our plans are bigger because our goals are bigger. Our goals are to be able to give affordable housing to a large number of people.
Absolutely.
Good affordable housing to people that need it.
Yes.
And the mom and pops, we started out the same way. We were doing the same thing just on a smaller scale. We've just scaled up,
And
and we decided to make the decision to scale up.
yes. And to add to that, what we saw during COVID, let's talk about COVID real quick. Just that I still kind of think we're in this COVID cycle, but that's a different discussion. But what happened during COVID, this to small business? Small business got demolished.
We just decimated.
Right.
It got decimated.
Because they stayed below this threshold. And that's what one of the takeaways I did, and shifted my brain a little bit. And I'm operating too small, and I'm operating still, even though I'm a business, I'm somewhat in the Avenue A world. And it's everything is in that scenario, everything is so painful. You're on the edge the whole time. I liken it to like when you're flying in a plane, and you know how like the cruising altitude is right in the cloud line and you're bumpy. To me, that's the Avenue A approach if you're trying to, and you have to get above the cloud level to really.
Hit smoother air.
Yes, and
Mm.
that is what we're talking about. And many of us learn the hard way, like myself. And you think you're at a stage where it makes sense, but in reality, you're operating too small. You need to grow be above that. To me, that's one of the core mistakes a lot of the mom and pop investors make. They stay too small and stay, thinking they get comfortable. Nothing wrong with that, but this is, with that approach comes additional baggage. But that threshold is key here. And yeah, the game changes on the other side of that threshold.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. I agree completely you reach a point where um, when we first started out, we had our plan and we started executing that plan, and then you reach a certain point where you either stay there or you grow. And if you choose to grow, what does that look like, and what do I need?
Right.
And you need to start asking the questions. to yourself and answering them. You can't just ask the question, you have to answer the question too.
Right.
You have to get that figured out because you're going into a different business plan. Your operations are changing.
Right.
So you have to have new policies. You have to have new things. You know, if you have to hire somebody, how are you going to hire 'em? Are they going to be 1099 contractors, or are you hiring employees and getting into the whole payroll thing?
Right.
You know, how is that expansion going to look? You have
Right.
to have those. Just can't go into it and say,
Right.
I'll deal with it later.
Right.
Bad decision, but a lot of
Right.
people do it. I did it.
I did it too.
I
Yeah.
did it. You know,
Yeah.
I just, you know, head first into it, and I'll deal with everything on the back end as it swirls around in the back.
Right.
You know, the problem is sometimes those swirls come up and they drown you.
They
Y-
do.
y-
They,
And
yeah.
those hurt every once in a while.
Yeah.
You know, because okay, all right, learn from that.
Right.
But you have to be able to ask those questions, ask the questions. You have to get the answers,
Right.
and then you formulate a plan to be able to do it. It takes some time to be able to get it done and get it done the right way, and it's worth doing it the right way and taking the time. I had to let one deal go this week because the potential partner wanted to get things done really quick, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I laid out a timeline when I wanted to be able to have everything completed and
Right.
signed and done, and that timeline just didn't work for them. They would need to have something done within the next 2 3 weeks,
Mm.
and I just couldn't do it.
I
And
see.
you know, we had this discussion in the last episode or the last two episodes. You have to be able to say no, and you have to be able to walk away from what is a really good deal.
Yeah. That's hard.
But you have to walk away. And
Right.
I walked away. Didn't walk completely away. I kind of left the door open because they kind of left the door open too. So I backed off and I said, I'm not going to be able to meet that timeline. I'm going to have to step back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to continue to pursue and get things in line. And maybe in a month or two, I can come back, and if things are still on the table at that point in time, great. If not, I'll find somebody else. You know,
Businesses. Yeah.
because it's a good project. And
Yes. Yes.
but you have to be able to say no, because to go head first into that
Right.
and to rush it causes more problems down the road than it does advantages.
Very true.
And that's experience speaking. You
Yeah.
know, it causes more problems than advantages.
Yeah.
So it's better to take the step back and to not get into that situation. Continue to build and get things in place within the time frame, and then revisit and
Right.
and see if they're still if it's still viable to be able to pursue
Yeah.
on their part and my part, because I have everything set up now. You know, there's I think there's some respect in saying that from the other side, that you got to kind of respect that.
Yeah.
You know, well, this isn't somebody that you know, they want to be able to do it right, you know, and not get things wrong.
Right.
And I'm doing that from a perspective of me and for investors and for the potential partner.
Right.
I want to be able to do things the right way. So there's got to be some respect there
And
for being able to do it that way. But for them, it just didn't happen. It isn't going to be able to happen fast enough because they have their own timeline that they have to be able to have things done for their own purposes,
right.
which
Right.
I understand.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
because you know their fiscal year was coming to an end, their annual meeting was coming up. They had to be able to utilize these funds, and I understood that. It's just wasn't working. The two time frames just weren't working together.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I, yeah. And kind of, getting back to the, the equity position, the equity discussion, the, number one, I think, kind of just kind of recapping, utilizing equity to grow versus trapped equity, is a skill set, and is going to be different.
You have to sharpen your knives
You
and
have
find
to,
sharp. Yeah.
you're going to find typically on Avenue A, they they're okay with the trapped equity because it's more of a different mindset, not a wrong one, but it's more of a security mindset focus. Whereas Avenue B, they're trying to extract this equity so that it can continue to grow at a faster rate. And which requires more skills, more training, more experience. And that, I think, that kind of is the, from a high level, um, that's that's really what it's about. You said something earlier. Having trapped equity is not a bad thing. I'm not bashing that, but I do want to say that sometimes, trying to maintain a steady state, there is no such thing as a steady state in my vocabulary. You're either going up or you're fighting not to go down.
Mhm.
There is no such thing as steady state. And, this is one of the many hard lessons that I've learned is it's less painful to continue to grow and learn. Yes, it requires a lot more hoops, 1099 people, bringing on other people and all that, versus trying to fight from going down, and maintain what is perceived as a steady state. In business, that in some ways really doesn't exist, a steady state. And so if you could just tailor your mind to, okay, we have to grow, the goal is growth, that kind of changes the whole conversation and the narrative that you kind of approach business with. Um, so yeah, I think, again, from my own experience, growing and getting to whatever that, these numbers are and these threshold are, is makes it easier in some ways from a mindset perspective.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to, like, yes, you're trying to maintain, but your target is to grow.
Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes having the mindset of maintaining can be a detriment to you because you've relaxed, take your foot off the gas pedal, so to speak, and that sets you up for vulnerabilities, potentially. So,
Yep. When I was a young boy working on my dad's farm, I loved the fall. The fall was filled with a lot of good things. There was the harvest, there was the smells and everything. But then after the harvest was all done, there was the plowing,
ooh, yeah,
and there was the chisel plow and like the regular plow and you were getting the ground ready for the spring, right? For the next harvest. I loved plowing because when the tractor went in, because one two wheels of the tractor were in the furrow that was made from the plow that allows the plow blades to be able to cut through the dirt and fold it over, right?
yeah,
And once you're in the furrow of the plow, you could just take your hands basically off the wheel. You could just kind of sack and just you're moving, right?
right,
You checking everything and stuff. It was cool, a little 10-year-old boy out here with this big tractor and four-wheel
right,
drive, right, and everything, and a lot of
right,
power behind you and everything. The one thing that I learned is that when you had the throttle all the way full and you had enough power to be able to move through everything, even harder ground. It pulled a little bit more and slowed you down and everything, but you had the power to be able to move through those hard times, right?
right,
I use that analogy because being in real estate businesses and growing your real estate business is sort of the same. You know, you have a path that you're going down, and you continue to have full throttle, and you're have the power to be able to move through the obstacles. You get slowed down a little bit, but you're still moving through things.
Right.
And when you look behind you at the progress that you've made, and it is pretty sweet.
Right.
You know, because you're growing, you know, and just like you know, every time you go up and down the field, you do a round, you know, that field is closer and closer to being completed,
Right.
you know. So that's like the business plan. Every time you go through and get and you keep going and you go around and you keep going, you know, you're getting closer to the end of your business plan for maybe that project, or for a number of projects, or for that year, whatever it
Right.
might be. But you're still pushing through. And I think that, you know, equity plays a big part in that. You know, because you have to be able to nurture that equity in different ways. You have to be able to balance it. You
Yes.
have to be able to utilize it. When you're in a position of a real estate investor, you don't want equity sitting for a long period of time. You know, like my business plan is 5 years.
Right.
You know, it could be a little bit shorter depending on circumstances and that, but you know, basically for about 5 years, so about 4 years, those properties are going to go on the market so that they can be sold within the fifth year.
Right.
And and that's how I pull the equity, unless I have to pull it in a different way. But that's the advantage of having that, reaching that threshold to where you can get a line of credit, so you don't have to touch that equity until your fourth or fifth year when you're exiting out of that property.
Yeah. Yeah. We're definitely gonna have to with one of these projects, follow this conversation to really zoom in on that threshold target number.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
that'd be nice.
I'm like, we have to, because that is good information for the community. Um, and it helps those in Avenue A potentially see, you know, somewhat of a okay, in order to go to Avenue B, this is going to be my target. It gives them a target.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of us, including myself, I didn't have that type of target. I wasn't even aware of it, quite frankly. But that's I yeah, we definitely have to report that back once we get one of these projects up and running.
Right. Yeah. Well, we kind of went over our time like we usually do, because we have a good discussion. I don't really want to kind of cut it off, but you know, we have to every once in a while. So we want to thank you, Bill, for being on today on the Scott Patrick Show, and for being able to talk about equity and how that works. And looking forward to next week, and a new topic, and that folds into everything that we've been talking about, and the many episodes that we've been doing so far. So thank you very much, Bill, for your time,
Thank you.
and see you next week.